as the country commemorates the Youth Month to honor the courage and sacrifices of the 1976 youth and celebrate all young people. Minister of Health Dr. Joe Patla and Deputy Minister Dr. Sibongiseni Dlomo would like to wish all young healthcare workers a prosperous Youth Month. Most of them have been the frontline warriors against COVID-19, just like they did against other pandemics and epidemics like HIV and AIDS, TB, cancer, and so forth. The attainment and success of the universal health coverage for all South Africans in the form of national health insurance relies on the commitment and dedication of our young healthcare workers of today, who are the leaders of tomorrow.
Why is it that young qualified healthcare workers migrate to other countries, and what should and could be done to ensure that young healthcare workers remain in the country? Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Dr. Musam Tombene, and signing with us today is Mpho Deme. June is National Youth Month, and Youth Day is commemorated annually on the 16th of June. We commemorate National Youth Month by shining the spotlight on young healthcare workers. On Vital Signs, we'll focus on challenges faced by young healthcare professionals in South Africa, and coming up on the program, producer Wandile Mfugeng spoke to 2 young nurses and 2 young doctors about the challenges that affect them within the healthcare sector. We'll speak to the president of the Young Nurses Indaba Trade Union about the number of issues affecting young nurses in the health sector, and we'll speak to the national coordinator of the South African Medical Association Trade Union about matters affecting doctors and the healthcare system. And then we'll speak to Director of Human Resources for Medical Program from the National Department of Health about the challenges faced by young healthcare professionals, and we find out what is being done to assist to retain these young healthcare professionals. Remember that you can be part of the show by asking the guests that we'll have on any question that you have on your mind by simply sharing your view with us on what we're discussing. The number to call is 011-714-5861 or 011-714-5877. We're also available on social media. You can find us on Twitter at SABC Vital Science or our Facebook page, SABC Vital Science. The show continues right after the short ad break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vital Science. Namhlanje sikhuluma ngabantu abasha abasebenza in the health sector nama problems abawafesayo since vele celebrate a Youth Month. Now, long shifts, exposure to illnesses, as well as poor treatment from patients, these are some of the challenges that young professional nurses go through on a daily basis. We caught up with 2 young employed nurses, Kylie Shange and Ncebisi Maloba, to talk to us about their personal experiences since they began working in the healthcare sector and what challenges and changes they'd like to see.
Kylie, thank you so much for joining us on SABC. Welcome to Vital Science.
Thank you for having me.
In general, would you say the experience that you faced as a young nurse, is it bad? Is it good? Just take us through your personal experience.
So in the private sector, obviously resources are easier obtainable and, they're available. Whereas in the private sector, it's not that easy. Because there's generally a shortage of equipment. Simple things like a needle, sometimes are very hard to go by. And what makes that difficult is that generally a nurse is made out to be like a superhero, right? We're expected to make something out of nothing. So if there isn't a needle and you haven't done a procedure that requires a needle, it's your fault.
Would you say those type of stresses would make one want to leave the nursing industry?
And I'm talking like in terms of the nursing perspective, right? Other healthcare professionals generally don't respect nurses. Obviously, you do find those that do, but it's very few. And then also because you're dealing with so much internal pressure, whether it's from patients, whether it's from doctors, and family members are equally stressful towards nurses generally. So you ask yourself, why am I here if I'm not being paid properly? I'm working strenuous hours. I'm expected to do the impossible, but there's literally no appreciation you know.
No, but thank you so much for giving us your time, and welcome to the SABC at Vital Signs.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I feel honored.
Talk to us about some of the challenges that you face on a daily basis as a nurse.
If we had enough people, whether it's doctors, nurses, porters, cleaners, if we had more than enough staffing, I swear, the service delivery in our government hospitals would be prestigious, because already what we are working on is good, but it's just not good enough because we burn out very quickly. If you're doing what 3 people are supposed to be doing and you're just 1 person, you burn out so much more quicker.
Now, would you say those challenges that you face as a nurse, or rather as a young nurse on a daily basis, do they make you want to leave the profession, or are you strong enough, or do you have to be a stronger person to endure those type of challenges?
Overseas, for instance, overseas nursing is, from this point of view, paying their salaries, their benefits. And when you think about how much, much more money you could make that side, the experience you could gain, and it definitely seems much more tempting. It's definitely much more tempting.
After the break, we'll speak to Rich Singlina, who is the president of the Young Nurses Indaba Trade Union, about a number of issues affecting young nurses in the healthcare sector. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vital Signs. Now, a group of young nurses recently marched to the health department's offices to protest the lack of employment opportunities for young people within the department. Now, this comes after the Gauteng Health Department announced that over 800 nurses would be without jobs by the end of March due to budgetary constraints. Now, the Young Nurses Indaba Trade Union is here to talk to us about why they're calling on government to absorb the additional young healthcare professionals that are hired or were hired to help fight the COVID-19 pandemic, who are now without jobs, and who will touch on some of the challenges, of course, that young qualified nurses face. We're joined by Rich Singlina, the president of the Young Nurses Indaba Trade Union. Good day, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good day. Thank you for having us. I hope that team, your team has within normal ranges Vital Sign.
That's a medical joke. It's very funny. Well done. So let's get into the discussion, Rich. Rich, you guys protested not so long ago. Tell us what exactly you were looking to achieve with that protest and what exactly you were protesting against.
Here, we are, Dr. Mtomin, we are actually protesting against defending the healthcare system. We are actually defending public healthcare system in South Africa because in 2022, we are still complaining about gross shortage of staff and gross shortage of material resources. Remember when COVID-19 started, even before COVID-19, we were complaining about these things. Then COVID-19 happened and the department obviously moved to employ COVID-19 workers on contracts. And in the meantime, we had professional nurses who have just finished their 4-year course. They have done a community service 1 year. That department announced to say they are actually going to release all of them. They are going to release COVID-19 contract workers, whether it's nurses or doctors or porters, it doesn't matter, but they said they are going to release them. They also didn't want to absorb, historically, something that they have already, they've always done, to absorb all COVID-19 contract workers and COVID community service professional nurses. So we were actually marching against that to say, in the system, we need these professional nurses who have done their community service. We need these COVID-19 contract workers because even with them in the system, we are still complaining about gross shortage of that because our issue is a chronic, it's a chronic issue when it comes to shortage of staff. So that is what we actually submitting those memorandum of demands to Department of Health, National and National Treasury to say release the budget. We are tired of going to these facilities and be used by the system as accomplices of murder. We are actually spiritually, mentally.
So let's look at the developments since then. I mean, March is when the protest happened. You've highlighted the reasons why you were marching and protesting. So let's look at what has happened since then. Has the department, has Treasury, who has come back to you? What have they said to you? And what has happened to all the people that were released from their contracts?
What actually happened?
We seem to be having
Yeah.
Good. All right. So you can start again for us, please, Rich. We seem to have missed you there at the beginning. The question was around what has happened, what developments have transpired since March. What is your reply to that?
Our move was very critical, and it was very important. If we didn't make that move as young nurses in our trade union to go to the street, challenge the status quo, and actually try to hold those in positions of authority accountable. Many of these COVID-19 contract workers could have been shown the exit door. What the Department of Health did in Gauteng in particular, they actually absorbed about 600 plus of them. The others were released. They didn't absorb them per se, but they extended their contract until next year, March, of which that was something positive. Even though we didn't want that, we didn't want temporal solutions to our permanent problems. We wanted permanent solutions. We wanted them to be absorbed permanently into those posts that they've been occupying since the beginning of COVID-19. And professional nurses who have done their community service at the moment, even though they are still struggling, and others are still not sure whether they are going to be absorbed or not, but many hospitals have actually responded to say we are going to not release them, but we are going to absorb them, because on the ground, we are actually suffering in as far as human resources concerned and material resources by the way.
So what should be done then to address this issue of having a lot of young people that have studied, have now qualified and are unable to get posts? What should be done from a nurse's perspective?
It's simple. It's very important now, because we are talking about universal health coverage. We are talking about NHI. We are saying NHI should actually come and put an end to this two-tier system healthcare system that we have in South Africa, the private and public sector, because those in positions of authority, they are actually neglecting our public healthcare system, because they are not the beneficiaries of this system. When they are sick, they don't go to Bara. When they are sick, they don't go to Prince Msheni. All we want, yesterday I was at Prince Msheni, and I was looking at their maternity ward, labor ward in particular. It's a complete mess. One professional nurse, you can't deliver 3 women who are bearing down at a go as a professional nurse. We don't want millions of nurses to be employed, millions of doctors to be employed, or millions of healthcare workers on the ground to be employed. We want enough nurses on the ground, enough doctors on the ground. We can't have a situation, Dr. Mtomin, where a person comes in casualty and then you stay there for 8 hours without being seen by the doctor. It's a complete mess, and it affects us psychologically. It affects young workers emotionally and otherwise. All we want to government is to say National Treasury. That is why we went to National Treasury. National Treasury, release that budget. Let's take care of our public healthcare system. You can't institute austerity measures against the healthcare system in South Africa, a system that takes care of people's lives. We are defending people here. All we want is they must employ more nurses. You can't release them. We can't allow that to happen.
Now, very quickly, before we wrap things up, Mr. Rich, this idea of a brain drain, where people in a system end up leaving to go to other countries to pursue their careers there. What do you think is one of the big reasons that cause such a thing to happen for young professionals when they leave the healthcare system, the public, and go overseas to go work there?
Number one, Dr. Mtombeni, now I'm a professional nurse. Today we got paid. Today we got paid, but our salary, I refer to it as a one-day tournament salary. Today, before 12 o'clock, my colleagues, none of them are poor already. You are working in this country as a professional nurse. You can't even afford a car. We are not even talking about German cars here. We are talking about i10s. We're talking about Fords, EcoSport, and stuff like that. You can't even afford a car and a house simultaneously. Majority of us are from poverty-stricken families. We need to take care of our brothers and sisters. By making sure you are taking care of a nurse, we are actually taking care of the entire community. When we are taking care of all healthcare professionals, we are taking care of the entire healthcare facility. Tell me, what do you do as a professional nurse when you go into the ward, a 45-bedded ward with 45 ill patients, and you are only 4 on duty? No matter whether you love nursing, whether nursing is a calling, whether you are compassionate and you are committed, you love your work like me, because you are human, we are going to crack. That is why people are leaving. It's our horrible working conditions. That's number one. Lack of support from those in positions of authority, including managers in the facility, and the government that doesn't care at all. Lastly, the poverty level salaries we are getting in this country. There's no appreciation at all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rich, for answering all those questions and really giving us an outline of what these issues are that are affecting young doctors and, of course, all the problems, young nurses and all the problems that currently, they face and all the problems within the system and all of that. Of course, there are comments and we always welcome them, and you guys have sent those. We've got one here, I think, comes from Twitter, and this is what it looks like.
Webster, and I'm a registered nurse by profession. I just want to say to all young health professionals, do not despair. For whatever you do with love, compassion, and kindness will never go unnoticed. As I quote the famous words of Maya Angelou, they may forget your name, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Stay shining. My name is Shenodine Webster.
Well, of course, those are words coming from someone at home watching and, of course, wanting to relay a message out to everyone that's watching. We're talking about young professionals within health and all the issues that they're facing as we discuss this in Health Month. Going for a quick ad break. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Vital Signs. Now, the path to becoming a doctor is a difficult one, and even being a doctor may be frustrating for some. Now, 35-year-old obstetrician and gynecologist Dr. Tsiamo Nakanyane sat down with us to share his experience of becoming a doctor and the challenges that he had to face as an intern, a ComServe, and now as a qualified specialist. Let's take a listen.
I've had situations where a patient was like, they don't want to be seen by me because I was too young. Oh, you're too young, you're too young to be a gynae. I've been told that I'm too young to be a gynae. That's never made sense to me. I'm not going to get into that.
35-year-old gynecologist Dr. Tsiamo Nakanyane sat down with us to talk about his journey as a young medical professional. He shares how difficult it was for him to be where he is currently.
There's been times, low moments, where I was like, do I really want to do this? Yes. But I think that came later during my registrarship, where I was just overwhelmed with a whole lot of things. And it's not just work, but when it comes to work, it was the strain in work where you suddenly feel like you're inadequate, suddenly you feel like you're not doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. You're not achieving the things you should be achieving. You set your own goals, but you're not getting them. Suddenly it feels like all the studying is also overwhelming. You can't do anything. And yes, I've had moments where I just was like, maybe I should do something else.
As he was pursuing his career as a medical doctor, he encountered so many difficulties that could have easily made him choose something else.
There was a time in my internship, where I did my internship, I was rotating in pediatrics, and I was on call. And in the early hours of the morning, the electricity went off. Around 1 or 2, electricity went off, and the generator did not kick in. And there were intubated babies that needed to be ventilated. So I had to stand there and help ventilate one baby. Another nurse was ventilating another nurse was ventilating another. We did that for up to 2 hours or so.
Equipment shortages, infrastructure problems, and shortages of staff are some of the reasons why health professionals choose to leave the country and seek work elsewhere. This is according to Dr. Nakanyani.
It's different from one hospital to another. Even within Gauteng, you'll find one hospital which is better equipped, and then you'll find one which lacks a whole lot of essential instruments that are necessary, you know. So a lot of us work under all of these different conditions, and it gets frustrating, and I can understand anybody who wants to leave the country, who wants to work somewhere else and work under better conditions.
Because of these pressures and work stresses, Dr. Nakanyani got diagnosed with anxiety and had to be on medication.
I actually have been diagnosed with anxiety disorder, and this comes with, I think this, one of the things that actually got me there was the pressures of work. So at a certain point in my registrarship, I actually needed to be on medication.
In some instances, patients do not trust young physicians, and Dr. Nakanyani also had experienced this.
I've been told I'm too young to be a doctor also. And mind you, I actually qualified about 2 years later than I had, or I was meant to, because of university. But I was still told in my internship and ComServe, and even shortly after that I was told, you look too young to be a doctor.
As a young doctor, he uses social media to reach other young people to educate and inform them about medical issues he feels the public needs to know about.
I have over the years been, on Twitter, tweeting about different medical conditions, tweeting about different things that people need to do, pap smears and what they are, why they need it and stuff like that.
When you are not at work, don't stress about work. These are Dr. Nakanyani's words of encouragement to the young health professionals.
You can only do your best, and I think that's probably just one of those things that I need, that I think, young and upcoming doctors just need to know, do your best and take care of you.
The medical brain drain that has stripped South Africa of efficiency in its running, of course, in the public hospitals is continuing. Now, the country is losing 17% of its qualifying doctors every year. Now, young African doctors find themselves actually leaving the continent to go off abroad to complete their studies and, of course, stay there. And this has resulted in a massive brain drain during this time of COVID-19. We're joined by Dr. Cedric Sihlangu, the National Coordinator of the South African Medical Association Trade Union, about the brain drain and what that will look like for our healthcare system, and of course all the reasons why young professionals are struggling with why they're actually working in the healthcare sector, and of course the reasons why they want to leave the country. Dr. Sihlangu, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Musa, and thank you for having us.
Lovely. So let's get into what you would define a brain drain to be. What does that mean?
Well, simply put, is really the exodus of healthcare workers in this instance that then migrate to other countries. They usually go to the Western countries, most certainly the UK, and most of them also go to Canada and America. That's really what we see happening. Unfortunately, that negatively impacts the home country, which is in this instance us in South Africa, because we then lose out on those skills and expertise.
So, would you say it's justified, or was it fair for them to want to leave a system that either one, doesn't want them, two, doesn't want to hire them, three, doesn't have the necessary, repertoire with respect to the equipment and things such as that will assist them in helping their patients?
Look, I should go back a bit, Musa. I just watched the interview you had that was done with Dr. Tiamo, and it's really touching, and that's precisely what doctors go through, the frustrations in the fraternity, especially in the healthcare fraternity. This speaks to the trainee doctors in particular, so the interns and the registrars. they go through a lot of stresses, and also issues of mental health care are not adequately addressed, and that really results in a lot of problems for doctors. But what you then see is that these doctors are working in less than desirable conditions. They're more often abused. You find interns doing over 100 hours of overtime. These are people that are meant to have a life, have families, but they spend most of their times in the hospitals. But in those hospitals where they work in, number one, there's understuffing. So one doctor will be seeing a number of patients. It's under-resourcing, so there's no equipment to actually do what you as a doctor are meant to do. Sometimes you have to just guess what the patient's vital signs are because there's no BP cuff, you know what I'm saying? So essentially, all those issues culminate into the big stresses. And as a result, doctors would then want to go and look for greener pastures, a place where they can start a family and make a better living. And you'd see these decisions being made to say that, look, South Africa is not doing it for me. It's just not cutting it. And therefore, I want to leave and find a home elsewhere, and they go overseas. But again, just to touch on the issue of job security, it's a big issue as well. When we graduated many years ago, a doctor would always be guaranteed that they'll have a job. Of late, there's no job security for doctors. We've been casualized in a sense that, a doctor will work for 3 months and 3 months off. You'll be given a contract that says that, you work shifts, and then you'll be given a contract that says you're only a COVID-19 worker, and then after that, it lapses. So all these factors will contribute to somebody saying, I'm leaving.
So with these factors that you've highlighted, I think a lot of it lives in and around resources with respect to equipment and facilities and, infrastructure and things such as that. And of course, the issue of staff. But in terms of addressing these issues, how could we potentially come up with solutions to these problems? What have you proposed to national government and to all the relevant stakeholders with respect to solving the current issues that we currently face?
Well, Musa, we first have to be honest that whilst these issues and these problems are well highlighted, they're not easy problems to just simply have, one solution that fixes them all. But a critical contributor to these problems is our current, they call it the procurement system, which is this tender system where, and we've raised these issues in the past, where the system is designed such that it's about profiteering for those who are regarded as service providers. So you find an entire government's budget is depleted within a short space of time because you want to give out these so-called tenders for service providers to provide a service, and then you pay them very inflated, very exorbitant fees for those services being done. And at the end of the day, you're not actually resolving the issues in the facilities. But another big contributor, unfortunately, is the high rate of medical malpractice that we're seeing in the public healthcare space, particularly. So what that does, it further depletes the very budget that you have. So you see these cases of litigations against the Department of Health over billions going out, and that therefore the department cannot run its affairs, run its business. So that also results in the big problems that we see. So what is essentially crucial is to redesign the system in its totality. It's not about bringing a very bright minister or bringing this and that. It's about revamping the system in its totality. And we hope that the NHI and universal health care as it's envisaged will be such an attempt. We only hope that it will bring that type of change. But as I've said, it's a very complex problem that would definitely need a multifaceted sort of approach.
Now, with respect to addressing all these issues and addressing the brain drain and all the problems that come with it, where in its current state is the future of the South African public healthcare system? What does that look like? I mean, you've mentioned that there are billions in malpractice suits. So that means if the government or the department gets 10 billion a year and 2 billion has to go to payouts, you've already lost 2 billion of that money that has to go pay for, malpractice issues. So where is the future of the public healthcare system as it stands?
Well, Musa, it's not looking good. But we ought to remain positive. I understand there's work being done in terms of the Law Reform Commission that's looking into changing pieces of legislation that, for example, speak to the issues of litigation, so that we don't bankrupt the system and kill healthcare completely, which is meant to be a benefit for everyone. So I think that element is going to be very crucial in dealing with the one problem, which is the problem of litigation. But of course, like I've said, there are other problems relating to the issues of procurement, where we have to deal with the issue of profiteering and reaching others at the detriment of the state itself. But we remain positive that with a good political will and good citizenry, insofar as those who are in government, implementing these proposed changes, we will see good change that will salvage or halt the current disintegration of the system. But it is not something that we anticipate will happen overnight. But if we have strong leadership in the right direction, then we should be fine. South Africa is a very resilient country, and we remain positive that something good will come, even though we're facing challenges currently.
Something good will come even though we're facing all these current challenges. That's Dr. Cedric Sihlangu, and of course coming from the trade union, really looking after young people or young professionals and making sure that they're looked after as well. And of course that is what that's about. Of course, like I said a little bit earlier on, we accept and are willing to, of course, see all the comments that you have for us. We have another one from Twitter.
Hello there, I'm Professional Nurse Modise, and I would like to wish the youth of South Africa a blessed, happy Youth Day. And to the young nurses and young doctors, keep holding on. The path and the journey in our profession is not easy, but God is on our side. We've made it through the COVID era, and we can still hold on and push on and give back to our community. Thank you.
After the break, we'll speak to Victor Kanyile, the Director of Human Resources for the Medical Program from the National Department of Health, about the challenges faced by young healthcare professionals and, of course, find out what's being done to assist and retain these young professionals. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vital Signs. Now, pediatricians are doctors that provide help for infants, children, and teenagers. Now, they specialize in diagnosing and treating problems that are specific to younger people. Now, this is one career path that 30-year-old Dr. Kekelezo Rasiobi chose, and she shares with us some of the challenges that she's faced. Let's take a listen.
Dr. Rasiobi, thank you so much for your time, and welcome to SABC News on Vital Signs.
Thank you for inviting me.
Firstly, what kind of a doctor are you, and your age as well?
Okay, so currently I'm a medical registrar in pediatrics, meaning I'm studying to become a pediatrician, and I am 30 years old this year.
Kindly take us back, man. When did you first realize or know or you want to be a medical doctor one day?
Yeah, growing up in a family of people that are about nurturing and helping heal people sort of made me also want to be that type of person. And I just found myself drawn into medicine.
Talk to us about your intern days, your community service days. How easy or difficult was it for you to get to where you are?
I didn't struggle getting a post for internship. And then the hospital where I was doing my internship, the senior people that we had were very supportive. And the hospital that I was working, they were allowing us to be very hands-on and to be independent.
Talk to us about some of the challenges that you faced as a young doctor, or rather intern, or while you're doing your community service. What were some of the moments that made you want to leave, or rather think of another profession?
There are some people that still don't trust us and still don't respect us, because the image that the older people unfortunately have when they think about a doctor, they think about a big white male, or wearing a coat, a white coat, you know. So sometimes when somebody comes to consult and then they find you like Bamakala, and some of them might have trust issues until you start talking to them, and then they start gaining that trust, and they're like, okay, this person actually knows what they're talking about.
Mentally, how do you deal, or rather, how do you de-stress when you have all these challenges, especially as a young doctor?
I don't have many friends, but the few friends that I have are very supportive, and they are also in the same field. So when I talk to them, they understand exactly what I'm going through, you know. And then for my family members, I talk quite a lot. I tell them a lot about my day, about how I'm feeling. And I grew up in a family where we were taught to express how we feel on a daily basis, and we check up on each other. So I think for me, I'm quite blessed to be able to tell my family everything and to get that type of emotional support.
As a young doctor, when yourself, what would your words of encouragement be to those who are coming behind you?
Some of us were sold a dream. When you think about being a doctor, you think, yo, you're going to get a lot of money, you're helping people, you get this title, people are going to respect you. And, you know, so some people do it for the title, some people do it for the money, some people think it's fun going out there and saving lives. But it's actually quite draining. So I think when people, before they come into the profession, they only look at the good side of being a doctor, but a lot of people won't tell you about the bad things or the bad side about being a doctor. So I think if someone wants to do it because they're really passionate about saving lives.
The Minister of Health, Dr. Joe Phaahla, admitted that more healthcare workers are needed and said that at least 7.5 billion rand had to be set aside for hiring and training of community healthcare workers and medical interns over the next 2 financial years. Additionally, he said that 2,429 medical interns and community service personnel, amongst them doctors, nurses and pharmacists, were employed during the current financial year. We're joined by Director of Human Resources for the Medical Program from the National Department of Health, Victor Kanyile. Mr. Kanyile, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Musa. We really appreciate you having us online as well.
Thank you. We'll give you an honorary doctorate and we'll throw that in there for you. So let's start off by looking at this idea of people coming into the system. So a lot of the time, every year, we hear of doctors after the January period that are complaining, or nurses that would complain that they haven't been placed. So how does the placement of healthcare workers work in state?
No, Dr. Musa, thank you very much. I mean, hearing from the doctor who just spoke, that in her tenure as a medical intern, she was indeed placed on time and at a very good facility, and also received quite good support, gives us hope that indeed in all this midst of challenges, there are certain areas where we are doing well as the Department of Health. One thing that we acknowledge is that as we look at from particularly 2017, there has been a high demand of positions for both medical internship and community service respectively. Therefore, which require the department to take a different view and also processes of making sure that, number one, there are sufficient number of posts available to cover all, particularly South African citizens as well as permanent residents who are regarded as eligible by the Health Professions Council of South Africa. In our engagement as the department with National Treasury, we were able to unblock, additional funding to ensure that all the platforms are funded and all that are qualified or regarded as qualified are able to start up a position from the 1st of January going forward.
Now, this idea of being in limbo is an interesting one, where people speak about limbo with respect to the placements, like I just asked, with respect to doctors or nurses, whoever it might be, finishing their studies and they want to start a job. They can't go work elsewhere in terms of working in privates and things like that because they still have to do their community service or still be placed in their trainee spots. And then the other idea of limbo is the issue of contracts, where someone is given a short-term contract but can't plan for the future only because it's such a short-term contract. So what issues have you highlighted from that issue of being in limbo, and how are those issues being addressed?
I think, Dr. Musa, we need to appreciate that, as I've already mentioned, that the unblocking of funding by National Treasury, working together with provincial departments of health, as well as the National Department of Health, has now dealt with challenges related to internship and community service. What we also have acknowledged is that after the program of internship and ComServe, those that qualify and wish to practice their trade in the public health sector, which indeed it is responsible to provide services to the majority of the South African population. And obviously there would be major challenges in this regard in terms of resources, meaning the availability of positions. Number two, tools of trade, as well as some of health professionals who spoke before me alluded to that point, which requires government to come up with initiatives and programs that needs to ensure that we cover all those challenges. Now, from the human resources side, we appreciate what the president has done, particularly when COVID hit South Africa, where he unblocked a funding called a presidential stimulus package, assisting what we have as the equitable share to employ health professionals in their majority in positions where they are required. What needs to be listened to is that, unfortunately, there are certain areas where you would require additional services for a particular period, not for a permanent position. So those would indeed be employed on contractual appointments. However, we need to ensure, or we have seen that with the COVID funding, we were able to extend those contracts to ensure that the service model delivery that is there, it's being sustained going forward.
Victor, I've got a caller on the line. This is Anonymous from Kagiso. Hello, Anonymous.
Hello.
Hi, yes. What's your comment or question?
My comment is that Rona as contractors, we still hurry government irrefaced, because why? They took the money that they said they are busy saying they don't have money, but they gave it to tertiary and secondary hospitals.
Okay.
Like Bobara, George Mukari. We are giving a service delivery at Onang. And another problem is that they, like Runa Kolerato, they promised us that we are going to be back at work 31st April for 6 months. That means it will be the contract year 6 months again until September. And all of a sudden, no, management what's the problem actually.
All right, Anonymous.
So
I think we've got the bulk of what you're saying. We've got the person from the National Department who can answer your question. So let's hear what the answer would be. So she's highlighted that she is a nurse, was hired on a short-term contract basis, and they were promised jobs, but now it seems like they are still sitting at home unemployed. How are we addressing these issues where people were previously employed on these short-term contracts, but the system requires the help that they do provide?
Dr. Musa, I think let me take you from what I've already initially said to say that we have what we call the stimulus package and COVID funding that has unblocked those contractual appointments. I need to inform the caller that we take the allegations that she has said very seriously as the National Department of Health. And I would obviously provide my details for further engagement with such employees who are in the same positions as she is. In terms of the appointments of contractual appointments, these are appointments done in terms of the Public Service Act and public service regulations. And they need to sign a contract that stipulates the period. Again, at or towards the end of that contract, it is an obligation of the employer to inform them a month before the contracts come to an end that whether they will be extending the contract for which period, or they would actually be terminating the contract, and also come up with supportive ways of how they would assist the individual going forward, meaning availing permanent positions where the person can apply to, and also supporting in regard to informing other resources that are available to ensure that we keep that particular individual into our services.
So with particular case of Anonymous, where it is assumed that none of this happened, that no one came to them a month before to highlight that the contract will be ending and what the future of that contract would look like, what recourse does Anonymous and many other people, I'm assuming, within the healthcare system that were on COVID contracts, what recourse do they have?
It is unfortunate that has already occurred. And obviously, as the department, we haven't received a query in this regard, of which our responsibility is to make sure that we investigate and come up with corrective measures to implement. According to our records, most of the contracts were extended in all the 9 provinces. However, we acknowledge that there might be some provinces whom have not extended the contracts. So it is unfortunately not possible to can divulge more, because I do not have the information as Anonymous has said, but I am availing myself and would be giving my details for contact to make sure that we look at the matter as we take it very seriously, and we need to come up with indeed corrective measures going forward.
All right, we'll make sure that Anonymous gets those details, and we'll see what details we can share publicly. Realistically speaking, I mean, you're the Director of Human Resources within the medical space. Let's speak about what the actual numbers look like. So on a national level, how many nurses, how many doctors do you actually need to have a functioning, reliable system, and what do those numbers currently look like?
Dr. Musa, we would acknowledge that there are service model employment processes that we put in place in ensuring that we've got sufficient number of health professionals that are dealing with the burden of diseases in the South African model of healthcare. Now, I have already alluded earlier that government or the public health sector takes care of 70 or over 70% or the majority of the needs of populations into the health sector. So the model that we use is in terms of the WHO patient nurse or doctor ratio as outlined. In terms of the numbers that we have employed in South Africa, and again, COVID has shown us that the demand rose during that particular period, and it was for a contractual or for a short-term period. Hence, we had to augment the current serving employees with additional numbers. So in terms of the records that we have currently, we have, and I actually didn't have this question prior, but I would definitely confirm that we have over 300,000 nurses, and the numbers will be availed to yourself as soon as I'm done with this recording. And secondly, we have over 50,000 doctors that are on permanent positions. The number that I'm saying are those that are on permanent positions, and I will be giving the actual numbers. But indeed, there are certain areas where are lacks, and it would be naive as government not to appreciate that there are certain areas, particularly our rural areas, where we are struggling to recruit health professionals, but we have put in mechanisms to ensure that there are sufficient number of health professionals that are serving people in a number of programs that we have employed, which includes, amongst others, merging with the private health sector of contracting doctors in that regard.
Well, Mr. Kanyile, thank you so much for joining us this morning and looking into those numbers, really addressing what the issues are and what the department is planning on doing with respect to addressing all those issues. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, that is the end of the show, and this is what it was all about. We're talking about young people within the health space, young health professionals, and the issues that they currently face, the issues of the brain drain, the issues of unemployment, and of course, the structural problems that are currently being addressed, as mentioned by the National Department of Health from an HR level. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next time. This was Vital Signs.